So, in this video, we're going to talk about the idea of appendicitis and the idea of visceral pain versus somatic pain. So, here I have a poor drawing, right, but bear with me. All right, so this is the drawing of a human body, and right here in the right iliac fossa, we usually have the appendix. Now, this is the T10 dermatome. All right, so just keep this in mind. Now, from the previous video, we learned that the midgut structures actually the midgut structures perceive periumbilical pain, so pain around the umbilicus, from sympathetics traveling from T10 to T12, right? So visceral efferents pain from the appendix follow sympathetic supply, so they follow sympathetic supply T10 to T12 in this case. Um, the dermatome for the appendix in this case would be T10. So they follow sympathetic supply back to the spinal cord, T10, and so early appendicitis is actually felt as a poorly localized periumbilical pain, right? So visceral efferents are usually visceral efferents is usually poorly localized pain. So, and in this case, we're gonna put early appendicitis. So in early appendicitis, we just talked about the visceral efferents traveling back with the sympathetics to the T10 dermatome. And so in early uh, appendicitis, the pain is actually poorly localized, felt in the T10 dermatome. Now, what's interesting is that um, in the later stages of the disease, or not disease, but the inflammation, um, somatic afferents come into play. In the later segment of disease, somatic afferents come into play. And let's say this is late appendicitis. Right. So the somatic afferents actually come into play. And so what happens is that the appendix makes a contact, and I can't draw the parietal peritoneum here, but the appendix pretty much makes contact with the parietal peritoneum in this iliac fossa. So it makes contact, it gets larger and makes contact with the parietal peritoneum in the iliac fossa, which is a body wall structure, and it's actually innervated by the somatic. They're innervated by the somatic nerves. So this actually produces a sharp, right? So the appendix rubbing against the parietal peritoneum produces a sharp pain, and this is because the pain is now from the somatic efferents. And so the previously felt pain from the umbilicus, which is in the early stage, the patient actually no longer feels that pain. Instead, they're feeling the sharp pain, which is coming from the umbilicus. So they no longer interpret the pain as coming from the T10 dermatome, right? So it's very interesting. Now, I wanted to show one more thing with what I was saying, and but let's go back to the spinal cord, and this is what I'm saying. So the visceral efferents actually travel with your sympathetics. In this case, when we talk about the appendicitis, it goes to the T10 dermatome in the early stages of the appendicitis. So this white line would be my post ganglion sympathetics, and this dotted white line would be my preganglion sympathetics coming from the lateral horn of the spinal cord. But in early appendicitis, the visceral afferents, as you can see, would travel back to the T10 dermatome, and that's why the patient feels this in the early stages. But look in the late stages, the somatic afferents, which takes a different route going back to the spinal cord, this is what produces that sharp, localized pain. And so, to bring back the concept that I was saying earlier, is that if you know the preganglionic supply to a particular organ, you should be able to determine where in the body pain from those organs will refer to.